Hola, buenos días para todas y para todos. If you
Hello,
want to listen
good
in
morning,
English,
everybody.
please click the interpretation button at the bottom of Zoom and select English. Lo mismo para quienes están desde Brasil, si quieren en Portugal.
Same for those of you who are hearing us from Brazil, just pick Portuguese from the interpretation globe. This session will be in Spanish. So, welcome. Thanks for joining this FBLI virtual session from GFN. I am Ana Catalina Suarez Peña. I'm the regional director of GFN for South America. We're happy today to have more than 130 attendees from over 15 countries, and we hope that programs like this will continue helping with the work you do in your different countries. First of all, it's an honor for me to introduce two guests from whom I've learned a lot, Sarita Palacio and Sergio Tangarife. Sears de Duende, it's an organization that's in charge of helping organizations and corporations to change the way they communicate. So, Sarita and Sergio, welcome. Thank you very much, Anna, for inviting us, and thanks to GFN for inviting us to talk to you. It's an honor for us. So, it's a pleasure. And for all of us who are accompanying us today, we will have two moments to ask questions. So I invite you to use the Q&A uh, icon at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to try to answer as many questions as possible today. So, Sergio and Sarita, you have the floor. So, a very special greetings to you, Ana Catalina, to Sarita, to everybody at GFN. When we received this invitation, we felt it was a real moment of pride for us, and to meet people who every day get up and try to change the world for better, to make a better world for everybody. So the invitation that we received at our laboratory of contents really has been a moment of pride, and we're very excited. So we believe in the power that companies and corporations have to make the world a better place. So we believe in stories and very well structured communication processes to leverage the work of organizations like GFN. So this was a challenge for us, and it's really touched our heart, and we're very pleased to be here today. So as I was saying, this space that we have now to talk about the power of storytelling and how our banks have a story to tell. So this started with an original question: How does it? How can we structure communication processes, advertising process based on stories, and how can we smartly structure marketing processes so that the global network will remain on people's minds. And so we start from the institutional reputation, institutional or corporate reputation, which can be built from different angles. The brand, that's a tangible and both tangible and intangible asset that's well protected by our institutions, and it needs to be projected. The graph that you see to the left shows how we can manage brand recall, starting from the relationships, the relation between interest group and stakeholders and the brand. So, and the brand, what I say about my principles, my mission, my convictions, and how do I project my institution? Where's my vision? How do I see the future of my institution? And all of this based, as you can see at the bottom, on institutional practices. There's no freestanding advertising or marketing strategy that can defend and project my brand if my activities show that my value promise, my vision is being fulfilled. So The brand gets built on my everyday practice, my everyday actions. And that quest to reduce hunger in the world is a story that's worth telling. There's different dimensions of corporate reputation, all the measurements, how this is recalled by stakeholders, uh, how a brand, a company, an entity can achieve a dimension that we need to study uh, on their everyday activities. So that's good governance. Good governance refers to the correct behavior in the different processes of the institution, both internal and external. So it's doing the right things, saying the right things, and it's the link between the two. Communication is an aspect of governance. It's a way of showing that coherence between what the institution says and what it does. Something else that international measurements for the reputation brand is the being a good corporate citizen. That's a contribution that the institution makes to society beyond the normal development of its operations. And the global network every day, as I said in the beginning, everybody who works for GFN gets up and tries to make the world a better place. And that seems to be a being a good corporate citizen. This brand is a good corporate citizen, and it's besides the sustainable development objective that it aims for, how this is complemented, how does it show its presence with good governance, and how it influences other areas besides feeding the hungry, culture, society, and other relevant aspects. Another dimension, another aspect that creates a good corporate reputation and generates good recall among stakeholders is solvency. We know that GFN is a an organization, a not-for-profit organization, and that doesn't mean that we want to have losses. Solvency means that we have an availability of financial, economic resources, we have relationships, and this shows the public, this shows our audience that we're solvent. An institution that wants to change the world but does not show solvency is an institution that's difficult to believe in. So again, we are not here to generate profit or dividends, but solvency is an aspect of our character that shows that we're reliable. That and internationalization, that's the possibility of expanding our operations to other territories. And this shows that our operational model, the product, the service, the reason for being, it's well executed, and that we have models to do a follow up. That is, our processes are so well structured that our clients remember us, because at the same time or in parallel, we have a model for pre-sales, sales, and post-sales that allows us to recognize what changes we need to implement to fulfill our promise of offering value. Another, um, the operational quality, as I said, it involves the correct execution of our promise of value. This it, the other one would seem a commodity for any global industry, and it's innovation. Before working at this laboratory in Duende, I worked for a company which also had this mission of trying to change the world. And I learned that innovation means more than improving the innovation model of the company. It's an attitude of the organization from every member of the organization, which is searching for ways to do things better, always based on ethical principles. That is, in an operational model, in a sales model for a product or a service, how are we able to invent new forms, new ways, not just to look different, but to offer a product or a service with quality. Another one of the dimensions that historically been analyzed is internationalization. This is a global food banking network, and it appears to be a natural resource for positioning the brand, but it talks about the possibility of expanding to other territories and building partnerships that create a cohesive unit that allows us to fulfill our main purpose, which is reducing levels of hunger, reducing levels of poverty, and to show ourselves as an entity that transcends borders, that we do not distinguish among different political classes, races, society, different societies, but tries to fulfill its objective. We also wanted to take a look in the short term to see where companies and institutions have placed their efforts to manage their recall. In 2016, we started thinking about different business models. We were still very focused on maximizing the value of the operation, on finding business models that would generate high returns, but at the same time not going against that sustainability of the company. So not having the generation of a good return go against the social purposes. So in 2017, the world started to wonder why, what the corporate purpose is, why, it's not just generating more dividends or a higher return, but giving some sense, some purpose to the activity of the company. So, how do I position the activity of the company as something that's worth recalling? In 2018, we were already immersed in the purpose economy. There was an impulse to adopt an active role in society, and the enrichment purpose became second place. And brands started taking an active role in defending communities, protecting communities. A couple of years ago, we were talking about purpose, the era of purpose. And this is what's really so satisfying about this network and why we wanted to share this information. So, the purpose, how this does this become a strategic guide? It's not just taking care of it, but trying to position ourselves and stating why the company has a purpose, and so trying to position ourselves as a sustainable, interesting social actor. And as a consequence, we started seeing profitability again. So 2020, this is the most atypical year in our history, for perhaps for everybody who's connected to this Zoom call. What we saw appear in the world, and we were not expecting this, is that many risk units were starting to be rethought. It changed all sort of paradigms. The purpose does not lose its place. The purpose continues to be a strategic guide, but we see the need appear to reformulate capitalism, to rethink and try to drive the evolution of the global economic system. Perhaps one of the most recalled issues last year was trying to achieve new significance. So there are three forces that, when they interrelate. They change the way we perceive the world and the demands that we have as individuals towards companies. And we're talking about social forces, technological forces, and environment. Um, the demographic explosion, interconnectivity, the changes in power, economic policies that shift more towards the east from the west, and that by itself changes the way Sergio, Sarita, Ana Catalina, David, any one of us sees himself or herself in relation to companies and the consumption of goods and services. That creates a change in the consumption trends. So this change plus my dimension, my multiplicity of dimensions as a human being, create different expectations towards institutions. So the management of the recall of these companies based on a study approach to the future from 2020 is a structural study performed by Canvas and other international institutions. And they mentioned that the recall of companies or international institutions will be based not only on the seven dimensions that we mentioned at the beginning, but there will be four relevant pillars. One of them is management in the era of algorithm. The unidirectional descending model has disappeared. What does this mean? An institution, regardless of how international it is, regardless of the amount of information it holds, or its prevalence, the corporate discourse, does not have the same strength because of issues like interconnectivity, technologies associated with the fourth industrial revolution, and algorithms made it that assure massification difficult. So, continue to issue the same message did not generate this concentration, this massification. So this appears as an opportunity because algorithms prioritize tastes, uh, starting from repetition, focused information. This allows me to reach in a massive way everybody, but segmented in a segmented way and focus based on the one-on-one, based on knowledge. So technologies like artificial intelligence, deep learning allow this opportunity to understand what my audience wants, what they expect. And it does not give me a chance to think, well, this is what I believe my audience wants from me. There's no excuse anymore because uh, analyzing our surroundings, analyzing social media communications, this is uh, it's not an excuse to not understand the consumer anymore. So perhaps the new challenge of our job is to go back to the consumer because we have this already at hand. There's a phrase from Stephen Johnson, who teaches at Harvard, which we love, and it says that in a world that's chock full of information, only the person who understands the best history, best story is the one who becomes the leader. So the leaders, inclusive leadership. So leaders, people who have that chance to inspire others, appear as a differentiating element. So this will be crucial to dominate the conversation. The word inclusion is very difficult. The inclusion as a planet, we have moved forward very fast. We believe that we have uh, shortened the gaps, but no, we're still far from reaching our objectives. But this is more an opportunity than a challenge. As global leaders, we have the opportunity to tell the world that inclusive leadership is not an aspiration; it's a reality. And to communicate in this territory will be a good path to recall. Today, public is more demanding with organizations, and they demand real action that signify an integrated vision of the different human conditions. The third pillar talks about brands committed to social, ethical, and environmental transformation. As we saw in that timeline, integrity, purpose, reliability are in very important factors, probably more than technical ability or operational capacity. It's not enough to say we have enough technical resources, we have enough operational intelligence, we have the best teams to understand what the world needs when faced with hunger. For example, the need to show our integrity and something that transcends our conviction that appears. So when I was talking about the mega trends and consumption trends, people prefer companies with whom they share common values and purposes. So we don't have consumers anymore who are just demanding that companies have a purpose. They want that purpose to be similar to theirs, to that share my ideology, what I'm here to do in this world, that they have a value and that allows me to have representativity, also to be represented. So also they expect organizations to proactively participate in solving problems, like the issue of eradicating hunger. Maybe our stakeholders are expecting us to influence things like access to education, environmental or climate change, which is the most important challenge facing the earth now. That we fight corruption, we fight poverty, we fight for equity, etc., etc., etc. Okay, measuring intangibles appears as the last pillar of the for the recall of institutions. Areas that are not involved directly with monetary issues in the organization will gain more relevance. So, but again, these areas that don't have a direct influence on the return on investment will have will be more important in sales. Everything that has to do with the long term, advertising campaigns that are not related to the sale of a product, but to a change of behavior in society, they become more relevant.
Areas such as human talent management or how you position your resources so that they get more valuable. Because nowadays you are competing and you're competing on human quality and you're competing with soft qualities. You are positioning leadership, you are positioning leadership and inspiration. So the only way that we can maintain a relevance is this is the fourth industrial revolution, and this is about who we are. So these intangibles in our organization can become the difference. And as I was thinking when I was preparing the slides, a company that sells commodities that cannot compete in terms of products, it becomes a lot more visible. It becomes, something that their consumers can be more loyal to when they take care of other things, how they take care of the resources, the human resources, how they care for the communities that they live in, how they treat their employees and their workforce. So this historical pathway, how you build your recall as a company, your image as a company. This is the message that I want you to take with you. How you generate recall memory. It's changing. So we have to really look at the environment. And we, as communicators, as advertising specialists, as marketing specialists, as somebody who works in the digital world, we need to remember that a big resource right now, for us right now, is our stories. And I'm going to give the word to Sarita Palacios right now. She is an expert on this. Thank you very much, Sergio. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here, for being connected with us today. So we can talk about one of the topics that is our passion for storytelling. The world moves on stories, and that's what drives it. And so we have to learn and we have to strengthen this natural ability that we all have to tell stories. So I'm going to share my screen with you right now so we can talk about stories and storytelling. You are a mine of material, precious material, your own stories, because you, each and every single one of you, from your daily lives and your work at a food bank, you are transforming the world. So, what we're going to see in this session, we're going to try to work on how to tell stories, what tools we have to tell these stories, and what techniques we can use to tell these stories. So, in the first instance, we're going to talk about 5 different formulas that we learn. And we have discovered the path to tell a good story. The first one is to talk to the public in their own language and about things that they care about, things that matter, things that they like. And here we have to sort of let go, all of us have to let go of the labels. Say, well, I like this the way it is. I think this video is interesting. I don't like the color. I don't like this picture, because you are not the public. You are not who reads your own stories. So you have to think of who you're directing this story to, who you're telling the story to, and what is it that I want to generate in that person by telling the story. What is the flavor I'm going to leave in their mouth after listening to the story, after watching the story, or after feeling the story. So that is what we need to do. And afterwards, we need to go back and say, well, I want to tell this person this story, and this kind of public, this is what they need to hear. So this is the way I'm going to present the story. So we need to think of who we are telling the story to, who we're talking to, and that is what this is about. This is about convincing, getting them to fall in love with you. And as the World Food Bank, at each one of our banks, we have our big mission. We have to mobilize all these people so they join our work, so they become aware of what we do, and so that we create a support network that surrounds our food banks. And that is our big challenge. The role of marketing here is to inspire confidence and trust in the work that we're doing. Because when there is trust, starting with the work that you're doing, that is when we get the return on investment that we expect to get. So we need to think of what we have as banks. The second formula that we need to use is based on building unique content that is useful and thought for the user. And in Spanish, we have the rule of the 3 U's. It has to be unique because we think our mission is very different. Useful because what is this going to be used for? Why is this going to be useful to the person that's listening to the story? To invite the donation so that they can share it with other people. How is this useful? And that goes from the feelings, emotions to action, to inviting people to act, to drive them to action. And then thinking of the user. And that is the first rule that we were talking about. And the third formula, this is the stories that we want to communicate. When you're thinking of a story, it has to count on these 3 ingredients. You have to have the stories that you want to communicate. You have to have phrases that can be repeated, and you have to have data so people can believe it. So you have a story so that somebody, a lady who's going to the market, or a man who's driving a taxi cab, or a lady driving a fire truck, talking to somebody, they can then recall and remember, hey, they told me this story, and I discovered that you can have an urban farm and you can do it this way because my neighbor did it also. So we have to find stories, cases from the real life, and we have to incorporate that to our big stories so that people can make that into their own stories to repeat, m- many phrases to repeat, quotes that are so fashionable these days. We have to have something that people can repeat. So phrases small phrases, short sentences that people can remember, and data, so people can believe. Data would be dates, it would be numbers, it would be a very specific case to mention, because people uh, need to be rooted in reality. They need to know that what we're telling them is not just an anecdote or just a fib. They need to remember that this is true, this is a fact. So we have the stories that people can remember. We need to have the phrases for people to repeat them. And then we need to have a huge database so people can base this on reality. In the fourth place, we have to understand the product, what we are, what we mean. What does it mean to ask us what we are, what we do, our possibilities and our opportunities, our big goals. And once we discover that, then we can communicate. We need to understand our public, we need to understand our product, and we need to understand the environment. This environment, we all have to understand this. It is not the same to communicate with people in Mexico City, in Medellin, in Miami, in New York, in French Guiana, or in Barcelona, or in Paris, or in Bruges. It's not the same. We all need to understand the environment, the social, political, belief environment, and we have to communicate differently depending on where we are. That's why we have to analyze our own ecosystem, our own environment to understand where we are. For instance, uh, have clear what kind of story we have to communicate in each given place, and that is very important to remember. We have to take it into account. And the fifth formula, never forget this, you have to repeat as many times as necessary. When you get tired of repeating something, it's like, oh, we've told this story so many times, and maybe by then the public is beginning to remember. By the time you're tired is when the public is beginning to pay attention. So I'm going to tell you a story. For many, many years here, we had a company, advertising company. They had something that they called the reason why, and they were talking about soap. And their soap had like a fourth of moisturizing cream. So, but they would give you the data, they wouldn't tell you the story. So, for many, many years, they did it the same way. We all knew that this kind of soap was moisturizing because it had a fourth of moisturizing lotion. Then they changed their storytelling and they incorporated, they said, well, this is soap for real women. And they told a number of stories. They gave us data. They had campaigns where they're really giving us these stories now. They're telling us what to think. So it's something that lets you understand where the magic is with this product. So after 12 years in this mission, we finally remember what this soap is because it's now targeting women. And that is where you have to remember repeat, repeat, repeat. Now, when we talk about stories, we are talking necessarily about emotions, about feelings. We're made of stories, but we're also made of feelings. We are made of sadness, we are made of fears, we are made of our own joys. People are the sum of their uncertainties, their achievements, their dreams, and we have to understand those to see how we can communicate. That's why we're going to remember these two quotes. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And we go back to what we said before. We are inviting people to in think about us. We want to leave them this flavor. We want to leave these feelings on their skin. When we tell them the story about the food banks, any food bank in any city in the world, what is it that we want them to take with them? Those who are going to donate, they have to feel that they have to be part of this. So the stories that are read at the right time will never leave you. You can forget the author, you can forget the title, you cannot remember exactly what happened, but if you can relate to the story will continue inside of you, within you, forever. So we cannot expect for people to remember the title of the story or who the characters were. Nobody remembers uh, the details. But the idea is that people remember what happened. People understand what is it that we tried to tell them. People um, should remember how they felt, and that is. I saw that there were 120 people connected or more, even people connected right now. So that's something that we need to remember. So uh, when people ask me what we sell, we don't sell anything. The idea is what we're trying to sell, and that's the most important thing to sell. We are talking about selling ideas, about selling motivation, about mobilizing people. Selling today is delivering information. In other words, is what we need to do to create content. How do I make a video on my camera, for instance? This is the most powerful tool that exists, the most versatile. You can show a video, you can show anything that you can think of, you can show it with this. So, how do I make this content? And I'm gonna show you in a moment. You can say, hey, hi, hello from Mexico City. I'm doing this. We started with the story 12 years ago, 4 women, 3 men. We decided that food. So when you do that, when you start with the story, you change the tone and change happens and connection happens and the story changes. And look, for instance, we're going to show you a video that I really love. And it's an announcement from Gabriel Garcia Marquez from Colombia. He could have given you a very linear story telling you, well, this is what happened, this is the story, but no, he didn't do that. It wouldn't have been as appealing. But this starts by saying this. The day when he was going to be killed, or Santiago Nezar, and then those 2 lines is like, oh my goodness, they already told me the end of the story. But after you hear those 2 sentences, you cannot stop reading because you need to find out what happens with the rest of the story. So the stories and how you tell the stories, that is what makes you interested and motivated. How to transform content into storytelling. And that is the most basic thing. And that's what we're going to show you now. And we need to give you the story, the characters, women, men, children. And we need to tell the story. We need to show who the characters are, what obstacles they had, what problems they had. And we need to have a very well defined journey to tell the story with all its moments and emphasizing what language you use. So you transform the people, the humans in the story. We're all eager to listen to stories, and we are all eager to listen to stories that allow us to think that things are possible. So a lot of things that happened in 2020 showed us that things were possible. We could do things. And just as a tip, think of your favorite movie. And I'm sure you can think of, well, what are each one of the most defining elements in the movie, the characters, what they do, what is the conflict, what are the obstacles, how they tell the story. So, to learn how to do storytelling, it's very important to listen to podcasts, watch movies, read books to see how other people do it. There's a show I just watched the second season that is very, very famous in Colombia. It's called New Amsterdam. It's a story about a group of physicians in a hospital in New York. And watch the show so that you can see how you can position your hero and you can do it in a natural organic way. And this is they're talking about very common topics that people are familiar with, but watch the show. Storytelling, let's do storytelling then as part of the content, is the way you tell the story, is how you use the story that serves as an example or an illustration in order to facilitate how you understand the topic. And for instance, one of the bestsellers in the world is the Bible. And if you think about it for a moment, and I am, for instance, I may follow one religion or the other, but let's think about the Bible. How does the Bible explain the precepts. They do it through stories. And, the storytelling is what people do from the Bible on. That is how we communicate, is the way that we translate uh, issues for people to understand, for them to fall in love with us, to work with us. For instance, in the movie Jerry Maguire, there's one scene that is the starting point to understand our clients better. Those are the people that we're trying to communicate with. Those are the donations we're trying to attract. And so in our case, we do not really want to make money. We want to get more of a return on investment. So look at this. This is meaningless storytelling. Juan wakes up every day at 2 a.m. Something else that's interesting about Juan is that he will never again be mentioned in my text. I just wanted to say something about insomnia, and I chose to have Juan. When I did that, then we have something like Batman versus Superman. It's a movie with characters that make no sense. Just to give an example, that's not even a useful example. So make sure your story has to do with what you do, has to do with your goals, has to do with what you do, and it's not just the story for the story itself. It has to explain why and what for. I'm going to give you an example. A few years ago, we lived this example. You may not be aware of it. The first thing is you do not learn from your success as much as you learn from your mistakes. You really do learn from mistakes because you review them, you analyze them, you wonder why. 14 years ago, we had a campaign against dengue in a neighborhood in near Medellin, which is where I am. And so it was a very big advertising agency. They created some billboards or signs to explain what kind of mosquito caused dengue. They made a beautiful design. It was a beautiful picture. It says, if you see this mosquito, please call this hotline and alert them so that they can send somebody to take care of the problem. So in that neighborhood, the number of cases went up, and it was very, very high number of cases, and nothing happened. And then they did what they had to do. They went back to the place to see what happened, what was wrong. So a lady told the people doing the assessment of the campaign, says, well, look, here, I mean, we're doing what you said. And it so happens that the mosquitoes that are here are not like this. I mean, they had seen them in a big sign, but they're tiny. They're not big. So we all sat down and we said, how is this possible? How is this possible? This shouldn't have happened. So people didn't understand. People did not. It wasn't that they didn't understand, it's that we did not think of the public itself, and we did not really think of how this story had to be told. That they're going to find lots of mosquitoes where there's water. They just looked at the sign and they were looking for that. So we need to make sure that the story makes sense, and you have to ask the right questions. The stories also have to use as the structure, the base for the content. They should be the guide. Instead of presenting the story through text, we have to have a base, we have to have different elements so that people understand it clearly. I'm going to explain this a little bit better. I'm here and I'm not going to do storytelling just for the sake of storytelling. It means that I'm going to tell you a story, the big story of the food banks. The big story is that I want to share information with you, how we can connect with each other through uh, food. And that has to be the basis for the story that I have to tell you. So after this conversation, I'm getting so excited I forget about time in here, but we have a few minutes for questions.
Hola, gracias a todas las personas. Tenemos cerca de
Hello.
140 personas
Okay, we have
conectadas
close to
alrededor del
140
mundo.
people
Gracias por estar
connected
aquí
for
y
this
conectarse.
exercise. Thank you
Si
for
tenemos preguntas,
listening. We don't have any questions yet, but I would like to highlight
Sergio habló
some things that
sobre
are interesting. I think
hay
Sergio
dos cosas que quisiera,
talked
tres
about
temas que
two
quisiera
things or
tocar y
three
empezamos
subjects that I would like for us to
pre-sale,
recall:
postventa. Cómo le hacemos a
pre-sale,
nivel de
sale,
Intangibles,
and
cómo hacemos
post-sales.
check-in, cómo le hacemos
How do
postventa
we
a los clientes, a
take
quienes
care of
atendemos.
each one of
Cómo hacemos
those
preventa, cómo
faces to the organization that we take care of. How do we do that pre-sale, sale, and post-sale of our service to our donors? Do we send them thank you notes? Do we invite them? How does that show up on our webpage? Second thing is, what is our value proposition, value promise? As a food bank, as GFN, what are we offering our donors, our organizations, the population that we take care of? What is uh, that we're offering, and how are we going to answer this question? And thanks, something that's linked its purpose. We are in the era of purpose. What is our purpose? Do we have that clear? The environmental issue, reducing losses and waste, ending hunger and poverty in the world. What is our purpose? Because that way we connect to our donor, and it will be much easier if we have a clear story to tell. I would like to mention something else and about how to build value. Now, going from consumers to pro consumers, our donors, our beneficiaries. What is a pro consumer of a food bank? And again, I'm thinking, and it's very interesting, related to what Sarita was mentioning in the end. How well do we know our public or audience? How well do we know our donors or the beneficiaries that we assist? As to the extent that we know them well, the message will become much more clear. And just another aside, you can call her Sarita. Her name is not Sara, so you can call her Sarita. Thank you. Okay, something else I'd like to add, just to clarify. In Medellin, we say little this, little that all the time. We use a diminutive of words. So when Anna was talking about pre-sale, sale, and post-sale, I want to clarify something. You are salespeople who sell ideas and purposes. How do we prepare the scene so that people crave buying that idea, joining that purpose? So what do we need to do for that pre-sale? How do we prepare the stage? How do we motivate people to crave becoming a part of our organization? Now the sale, what's the story we use to make the sale? Let's learn from the best salespeople, those who used to sell encyclopedias door to door many years ago. How do they close the sale? People who sell cars nowadays, well, you're going to say a car doesn't have anything to do with what we do, but I mean, they have these salespeople have the power of creating stories. And post sale, where did that product or service go? How did it change their lives? So stories told about that. Um, a story with a capital S. Or how do we go from the story to history? Because wonderful post sale that will, if we close the process that way, that will allow for that person to come back and buy again. Okay, there's a question. Do you recommend storytelling all the time, including stories of beneficiaries and donors in case of natural disasters or the COVID-19 emergency? We help populations that have lost life, sometimes have lost lives, and it seems sometimes that we are trivializing those human losses. Okay, thank you very much for your question. I think we can both of us answer that together. Storytelling is absolutely something that we can recommend at every point, at every stage. Now, the question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we tell the story? Because the stories are what humanize that information. If you see a press release, sometimes that's people don't pay attention to that. But if you tell what happened, how it happened, why did it happen, what will continue to happen, if you focus on the future. Um, if you give people hope, and then people reconnect. So the question is how? How? I mean, COVID 19 has left us with many doubts, with a lot of uncertainty, and you answer uncertainty with stories about the possibility of certainty, stories that tell you that everything's possible, stories that create hope. And you don't have to show the person with the respirator, the person that's down. No, you don't want to make a spectacle out of pain, but you can tell the story of a family that achieved this or that, or we tell the story of the bank. Well, this year we have 200,000 people who suffer from hunger, and what did we do? We did this and this and that, and we allowed for people who maybe were not able to have 3 meals a day, but at least they had one. So this is important. There's the pedagogy of data. You invite people to ask questions. So, how many meals do you eat a day? How many times a day do you get clean water? If you drink 8 glasses of water a day, which is what's recommended, do you think that maybe people don't get a clean glass of water every day? Uh, so we discovered that at the bank. We heard about that and we got to work. So you're telling a story from the viewpoint of hope, not just pain. So what's happening to you? 1 million tons of food. Is that too much or is that too little? Or that equals so many breakfasts, so many meals. So
Gracias, Javier.
telling
Hoy
that story of
vamos a
data that way is
empezar.
very important. Sergio, sorry, and I would like to compliment Sarita's response. Also, I want to thank Gabriela for participating and asking the question. Sarita mentioned storytelling is not just a trend, it's not an issue of fashion. You know, she used the Bible as an example. And since then, the the idea is to show human lives, human emotions, and that has to be based on ethics. So when we wonder what to tell, what not to tell, we always have to base that on our principles. For example, yeah, let's say misery, poverty exists, but we need to logically decide which stories to tell, which stories not to tell. And speaking about trends, what follows storytelling is story doing, and Sarita will expand on this later. So, but now that we're answering questions, how can we involve our consumers in developing those stories so that to complement what Ana Catalina was saying, to uh,
Sergio, gracias.
turn them
Vamos a ir
into
con
pro
una pregunta
consumers?
que nos dé
Okay,
5 minutos
we'll
adicionales y luego ya nos quedan 15 minutos para hacer el
take two
cierre.
more questions, so that's
Em,
5 more minutes, and then we will have
Vamos cerrando
15 more minutes for
porque
closing.
nuestro banco de alimentos
We
está
have
haciendo
a
unos
question
números
from
bastante
Juan Pablo
fuertes y es,
Ruano from
¿las
our
historias
food
enfocadas
bank in
en
Guatemala.
cada segmento o también puedo tener
So,
historias
do
generales que
stories
no
need
estén
to be
segmentadas?
oriented to each segment, or can I have, general stories that are not segmented? Well, when we do something that's for everybody, that ends up being for nobody. You have to think, if you're talking to everybody, well, not everybody thinks the same way. Not everybody goes to Disney World. Not everybody drinks milk. So so you don't need to decrease salt consumption if you don't have high blood pressure. So what do? You need to segment, but go into wide segments thinking how many people can I reach with this story. So I recommend two videos that you can search for. Uh, you know, YouTube always has an answer, right? So go to YouTube and enter storytelling, organ donation, dog. Look at that video, please. Watch that video. There's no spoken language. So, and you know, that's not for everybody because some religions forbid organ donation. But how can we reach the highest number of person? link to a segment. But it always you always have to segment. It's not hard to tell a story, but it's harder to
Gracias, Sara.
build that segment that
Sí,
you're
ya sé
addressing.
qué me pasó. Eh, y voy con la
Okay,
tercera en este
I
momento y es, nos preguntan desde nuestro
the
banco, desde Zapopan en Jalisco, en
bank
México,
in
cuando contamos una historia, lo
Zapopan, I'm
importante
sorry,
es hacerlo
Jalisco,
claro y
Mexico. The
concisa.
question is,
¿Qué
when they
tipo de
tell a story, the
imágenes
important thing
recomiendas
is
para
to
poder transmitir
send
este
a
mensaje?
clear and concise message. What type of images do you recommend to be able to convey this? I'm gonna recommend again the account is Pictoline. It's very much fun. Uh, is educational. They tell stories, and you know, so infographics are a reference for this. An infograph is not just a data graph, is telling a story of the data. There's a book that you may have read already, Sapiens, and this is the illustrated version. And this is much more didactic, uh, much more pedagogical or educational. And it's in comic form. Think that you can go back to the comic. I remember when I was a kid, my mom would tell me to a large supermarket to buy my comics magazines. And this is a narration frame after frame. You don't need to be an excellent you don't need excellent designs or excellent drawings for this. You need to be able to tell a story. Photographs also, photojournalism. There are photographs that don't need a caption because they tell a story. Uh, that story, for example, the woman from Afghanistan, the young girl with the green eyes, story about people who were suffering from hunger. So let's look at that those photographs, see what story they can tell for us. Uh, Ana Catalina, I wanted to add to that segmentation gives us a clear guide on what type of photographs to use. We can fall into that trap of the image banks. Image banks just show beautiful people. Everything is wonderful. Fruits look great. Landscapes very detailed. So, to the advertising and marketing groups, let's build our own image banks
Súper,
based on
me
our
encanta.
own reality.
Vamos a poner, no se
Okay,
preocupen, ya
great
estamos
tip.
apareciendo en
Okay,
el chat
don't
los
worry, we're
links
gonna
del que Sarita nos
uh,
habló.
put that link to the video that
Veamos
Sarita
un poquito
mentioned
más
in
adelante
the
para poder
chat,
continuar 15
and
minutos
we will
y
come
después
back to
venimos
questions.
y volvemos a
We'll have
responder
15 more minutes of
todas estas preguntas
presentations,
y
and then
temas que tenemos acá.
we will answer questions and close.
Sarita, Guzmán.
Sarita? Okay, let's continue with the presentation, but before that, I would like to recommend two videos to you. I'm going to give you the names, and then we can provide you with the links. First one is tips for storytelling. Andrew Staten is a TED Talk. It takes it's 19 minutes, really inspirational and really educational. The other one is another TED for Rosario. In Argentina, it's called Old Shoes, Zapatos Viejos. So those stories. Uh, there's many TED Talks actually that will help you get acquire more knowledge about trends and uh, there's many good TED stories. I'm going to share my screen again. Let's look at the process to create the story, to do storytelling. The first is the presentation introduction. I have to tell who's talking. I have to give the context. Who's the character? The context. What's the reason for this? The characters are shown in their world, with the whole showing their whole routine until something happens that changes their life. This was a family that woke up at 4 every morning, the kids to go to school, the dad who was the main provider to go to work, and the mother to go to do the to buy groceries. But the day came when they said we all had to go into lockdown, and the dad couldn't go back to work. The mom couldn't go meet with her groups, and she was teaching people how to plant. And so she started a her own uh, planting in her own house, and she started sharing this with the community so people could take seeds and start uh, their own backyard, uh, start planting produce. But every obstacle generated another obstacle. The kids couldn't go to study; they had to stay home. The dad couldn't go to work. They ended up not having enough to eat. So in this journey, we're following the transformation of the main character, which in this case is the mom, and she thought, well, I need something to help me in my life, but I can also help my neighborhood. So the third act is the change. The characters are shown in their new routine. Now, the kids would have classes online. Then, after that, they would help their mom with planting vegetables and fruits. Then they would put out outside their door seeds for the neighborhood to take. So this is the story, the hero of the story, what led to the transformation, to the change. And after the change, let's say that we're asking ourselves, why storytelling? Well, to connect with the emotion, something that has a strong repetition, stable and lasting. Let's imagine Peter and Paul have lost their house keys, both of them. They have both their own home. So they went to a place to uh, get keys. And they start talking about the pandemic. What are we going to do? It's very difficult to go grocery shopping. So Paul says, Peter, you know that you can plant fruits and vegetables in your own home. Where can I learn to do that? Let's imagine, well, they say there's a food bank. So, what's a food bank? So, you can tell the whole story. So, storytelling mobilizes, it connects people with content that's unique and focus on the user. So, the objective is clear, to connect with others through stories. So, how do I give people goosebumps? How do I make them understand what a food bank is for? So, this story will talk about transforming the world. So I'm appealing to them in two different levels: rational, aimed at logical processes that people follow, data to convince, and the instinctive aspect, the emotions of human beings, stories that you can repeat, phrases that you can quote. How do I connect? How do I uh, excite, motivate, convince, mobilize? So I have these two levels of in my strategy for storytelling. Let's take a step further. Storytelling is the act of telling a story, is a narration, and something that I do to create awareness about a process through a story. Now, with the pandemic, we're being told stories of countries that collapse, cities that collapse, stories of leaders that have lost control of the situation in their countries, also the stories of women leaders who are moving forward. They're thinking about ways not just to avoid the disease from spreading, but also how to deal with the issues of unemployment or mental health issues. So, how can these stories create a difference? So, based on studies in anthropology, psychology, marketing, advertising, we've all understood that it's not just a matter of telling the story. We have to work on story doing. Another term that will explain. Story doing is the logical evolution of storytelling in online and offline media. We're not just trying to tell a story, we're trying for people to get involved and to live the experience with the brand. In this case, the consumer becomes the protagonist of the action. Some people call it pro-consumer, prosumer, pro-consumer. We need people who not only say, well, I love this story. Uh, no, I love this story, but I also want to be a donor. I want to tell this story so more people become donors. I want to make this trend, this work that's being done in the world, I want it to go viral, this work to fight hunger. So, how do we achieve that? Is what Ana Catalina was saying. We need to think about the pre-sale, the sale, and the post-sale. How are we going to achieve to reach this stage of broadcasting or rebroadcasting this? We have to tell people why we have to do it. We have to close the sale, and we have to have this post-sale. I'm providing my grain of sand and how do people's lives get transformed. So tell the story of the data. And to be effective, a storytelling strategy has to be based on these three pillars. What is it that we want to tell? The final objective story doing is conveying something about your products, your brand, about your organization. To that end, the first step is you need to ask yourselves, what do you want to communicate? What, why, and what for? So, what do I want to tell? Well, this story. And what for? What do I want to be the result? So, what we want, number two, what do we want to provoke, to motivate? What do I want to happen when they get the goosebumps? It's like, promoting a coffee cup. What do I want that flavor to be? What do I want to remain? So we want a memorable reaction, something that connects the users with the brand. You are a brand. You have an idea. You have a purpose. And the story you tell has to be so powerful that in the end has a call to action, the invitation for people to get involved. So people don't say, oh, what a story, but like, like the story of the dog that I shared with you is not, a just a beautiful video. I want people to want to become donors or to get involved. And third, what do we want to achieve? We need to improve donations. We need to get products, more consultants, or so this is what I want to achieve with this public. This is what I have to tell them. This is called the ROI. And before concluding, I would like to recommend to you some tools that will be useful to you in your daily activities to be able to tell the stories. I'm going to start um, telling you here so you always keep them in mind. The first tool that will be useful to you every day is Think Link. It's a tool that will allow you to create this interconnected multimedia with video, audio, links to text. It's very good and it'll be really very useful for everything. The other tool for those of you who use audio is Audacity. Audacity allows you to edit videos online, to edit audio, to export them to MP3, to create podcasts, uh, which are so important nowadays. There's another one called InShot, InShot, which will allow you to edit videos online. It's a free version and a paid version. There's another tool, Video Leap, Video LEAP, another very easy to use tool which will allow you not just to edit videos but also to mix videos. And another one that's very important, DuckDuckGo, DUCK Go, which will allow you to do anonymous searches. And finally, Canvas. Many of you have used it already. They have a free and a paid version, and it allows you to edit all sort of formats. So you not only will have very well told stories, but very well edited stories, very well shown stories. Final is WENN GAGE, Wengage. And these answers that question from the bank in Guatemala, the food bank in Guatemala, about the graphic representation of stories. These are all new tools that have free and paid versions. They allow you to create in different formats or export in different formats or accessing other services. But those are going to be very useful tools. Audacity, it's been around for 20 years and it's still what we use in companies like ours. We have 40 people producing content all the time. They use that to audit, to edit audio for all those companies. And after this, I would like to hear from you to see what questions you have. If you have any specific cases, we have several banks in Mexico and Colombia who have a great ability to tell stories. But what we want to propose today is that you don't stay with what you have today. Ask yourself the question, what else can you tell? In what format? Uh, ebooks are something that will allow you to provide value information that's downloadable, and you can follow the traffic and see how many people downloaded. You can get that data, and also you will have your own database to contact people who are potential donors. Another thing I wanted to recommend is this book. Uh, It's Rituals for a Creative Life, a creative life. The publisher is Fera, Fera. This will allow you to unblock your creativity because sometimes you cannot think of a story to create. No, you will one idea after another. You will reach that story that you want to create. So, Kata, I don't know if we can go to questions now.
Sí. Perdón.
I apologize. This team, I mean, they fly, they go at the speed of light. I'm looking online for all the names and the sites that she's talking about. I hope I put all the right links on the screen. As you know, this webinar has been recorded. You will receive it. We are looking forward to sending the presentation itself, and we will add a slide with all these apps too. I promise I will have it. Of course, don't worry about it. I'm going to go with a few of the questions right now. The first one is, how can you do the storytelling so that you put people that work in the food banks as the protagonist, the hero of the story. They are the story we're telling. So we believe the banks have a story to tell. The work that they do, the efforts they make, who created them, the founders of the organization, people who work there every day, those people that last year, despite the message that was do not leave the house, stay at home, they had to go to the food bank every day. So how to tell the story from the point of view of the food bank? That is the story. Yes, because we are always thinking of the beneficiary. Those are the stories that we're used to listening to. So let's think of, what the food banks do. Let's make them protagonists. They also have families. They also have problems. So what obstacles did they have to overcome in order to do their work? What were they able to achieve? And they worked as a team. It's very, very important to tell the story from the point of view of the people. It's a story of teams, people working together, suffering together, and daily they have to face the bad things that happen, and they share their goals, and they have to make the difficulties they face part of the story and how they overcame those difficulties. Those are their stories. That is the story of thousands of heroes that you have to tell. Women that left their children at home to go save other people's children. Many people that left their daily activities behind to be able to help with the food banks. Young kids and young people that also helped. So that is the story, and it should be that people feel, well, I want to be like them, I want to do what they do. I think that's what we need to do, attract more people to this model. Wonderful. If I can add something to it, the stories are a resource for survival. When we are children, they tell us stories so that we understand how things work. I don't know how this works in the different continents, but for instance, Red Riding Hood or the Three Little Pigs and the stories that were told, those were educational tools. My mom and dad would tell me how not to lie, how you had to plan your life, and they did it through stories. And these storylines are things that you learn, and so do consumers and the public. They learn easily if you get the story this way. For me, as a consumer, it's really hard to remember the logo, for instance, for the food bank, as opposed to remembering the story of a person, somebody that wakes up in the morning, gets up, and has a routine in order to change things. So this is neuromarketing, and it's a lot easier to remember what Ana Catalina as a person told me versus what a brand told me. So that is something that we need to keep in mind.
Wow, qué dato tan
Wow,
impresionante ese.
that's
Ok,
very impressive. That's
nos va a ayudar
incredible.
mucho.
I think that we're going to remember that. Another question that we have, and I think this is very interesting. Thank you so much to everybody that asked. We should start talking about people with no hunger. Should we talk about a world without poverty, a world without hunger, or should we talk about reality, the situation we're living right now? I would like to propose a formula to you. 30%. Let's talk about people facing hunger. 30%. Let's talk about people that overcame hunger thanks to the efforts that we're making. 30%. Let's talk about the purpose, the the our purpose, fighting hunger. So 30% people facing hunger, 30% people that overcame it, 30% the efforts that we're making to end hunger, and 10% random, the story that we want to tell, what happens, daily things. I don't know, the different types of vegetables, products, dairy, whatever we want to talk about. Because you always have to have some flexibility so that you can move the story to where we need to go. And I think that to Sarita's formula, look at the behavior that consumers are showing and do something. So 30% of people they're not facing hunger, 30% of people that overcame hunger or work on the world. overcoming hunger. So measure, review, do it all the time to see what kind of content is the content that has the biggest impact. And so you can use the flexible portion, that 10%, so that you can sort of position your message uh, appropriately.
Gracias, perfecto. Voy con dos
Thank you.
últimas
Perfect.
preguntas. Voy
I'm
a
going to
responder
ask the last two questions. Daniel
solo las
Vasquez
primeras
from
cuatro
Paraguay. I'm
preguntas.
not sure what the
Una
question
pregunta muy
exactly is, but I'm
sencilla.
going to try
¿Cómo
to
manejar la
understand it.
comunicación cuando
How
no
to
se hace
manage
efectivo en el
communication
momento correcto?
when you don't do it at the right
Esta es la
time
primera.
or the right
La
moment?
segunda
That
es,
is the first question. The other
¿dónde
question is,
podríamos
do you know
encontrar
where we can
datos de
find
consumidores o consumidores
descriptions
calificados
of
para dirigir
consumers? How do you do this
información
country by country? Where do we find information about
Sergio
consumers
que nos trae?
to see how people are behaving in each one of the countries? The first question, the one about opportunity. Uh, yes. According to what we just talked about, the capacity of consumers to learn from people better than anything else. The presentation, humility, it's a really good way of showing. Sometimes, yeah, the timing is not working for us; it's working against us. If we don't, if I understand the question, if we want to communicate something, it has to be done on time when it's necessary, and we have to be maybe aware of what situation we were living that didn't allow me to communicate at the right time, and we have to explain that. So that would be one way to do this.
Gracias, Sergio.
Sergio, thank you. The second question, I'm going to put it on the chat so that everybody can see it. But we're going to have several recommendations. First of all, ask. Consultation, Harvard Business Review. They're always talking about trends for consumers. Visit those sites. Make it into a routine. Check with colleges and universities. And there's something else that maybe you don't think of when you think in food banking. MIT Technology Review. These two magazines are in English and in Spanish, and I think there's a version in Portuguese as well. So review them because they are totally dedicated. These are the two universities that I read the most, and that helps you understand where the world consumer is going to, what the trends are, and they're going to tell you the main global trends in consumption. So they're going to give you information about the international landscape, and they're going to give you the links so that you can review the latest trends. And lastly, I'm going to give you an article that explains or analyzes where these trends, consumption trends, are going. And Euromonitor is also a resource because it has a consumer analysis that you can use. It shows you what's going on in Europe, but you can apply. I mean, you can, of course, modifying it, but you can apply it, sort of maybe delay the response for Latin America. Sometimes in the US and in Europe, things happen at the same time. In Latin America, it may be a little bit delayed. And their social report is a real time source of information online, and it shows you by world zone, by channel, by social networks, and it gives you enough information to see how many people are connected from a mobile device, how many from a desktop, what are the times of the day when people connect, during the day, during the night, how many people use WhatsApp, how many people use LinkedIn. And there's a lot of very interesting comparisons so that it really helps you analyze and review. And Social Studio, there is a free version and a paid version that allows you to have like a social listening network. And you can configure using the words that you choose. I can use my bank, for instance, my name, and it will bring to me conversations in real time that let me review, see if the audience is connected with our topic. I don't know, during the last few minutes of the day or during these last few weeks, and you do it by topic. It allows me to match information so that I can make decisions. So with my brand and the value promise, I can analyze and review all this information. Um, I wrote all the links on the chat box, and you can review the trends there. And those are tools that you're never going to stop using. And this trends review and let you analyze what's going on in real time. Thank you so much, Sarita. I'm here. As you can imagine, I'm moving all my technology, making sure that we get information, that we get the chat going. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you to the entire GFN team, all those of you that are behind this effort that we've never done this before. Thank you, January, David, Anthony, the translation team. Immense thank you to everybody, those that made this possible. Thank you, Sarita. Thank you, Sergio. Thank you for being here. Thank you for this fantastic session that we had today. Thank you for the inspiration. And I would like to leave something with you. You heard Sarita and Sergio say, I consume when they were talking about the links that they were offering to us. Remember that all of us are consumers too. We are consumers. We consume all the time. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, television, commercials, radio, podcasts, videos. We're always consuming. So, how do we do it so that that level of consumption that we have, how do we make that lead us to a better life, a happier life, and how do we assure that we're on the right path to what we want to achieve? Thank you for being here. I want to ask the sponsors, General Mills, HEB, Cargill, DNA Piper, Lala, Ingredient. Thank you. Thank you so much. You will receive an email later on today with the link rating. This extremely important for us so that we can improve every day on the job that we do. And please take the time to complete the survey. There will also be a link on the same email that will lead to the recording of this session. We will share that with you. We will also share the presentation with you. Thank you so much for being present today. Thank you for the incredible work that you do every day. Thank you. Please take care of yourselves and your family and your coworkers. Thank you so much. A big hug from the entire team at GFN.